My name is Kilkenny, the host of the Modern Mystic podcast. And today I am thrilled to be having back Michael McQueen, who is an expert intuitive tarot reader and psychic advisor. At the age of 12, he developed a very special relationship with the saints and angels. And that led him to graduate from St. John's University in Queens, New York, with a degree in theology. He is truly a master tarot card reader, and I am thrilled to welcome you back, Michael, to the podcast.
And I'm thrilled to be back on the podcast, and I'm very excited for our discussion tonight.
Well, Michael, as I mentioned, you're back time number 2, and you're one of the only guests I've invited back thus far because your first episode, which was episode number 13, The Powerful Life Tool of Tarot Cards, literally blew up. And folks just love that episode so much. Even like a waiter down the street was talking to me. It inspired him to get his tarot cards, and I didn't even know he listened to the podcast. And it was this whole thing because of that episode. And I know in the past episode we spoke about the history of tarot a bit and some other things. Maybe we can briefly recap for those who haven't heard that episode. But if you haven't heard it, definitely check out number 13. It's brilliant. But I can't wait to hear your answer to the question I ask all my guests, yet anew, which is, what does it mean to you to be a modern mystic? Because as mystics, we are constantly developing ourselves and evolving, hopefully. And one of the things I love so much about you is your passion, your fervor, and knowing you personally, how you have such a fierce commitment to your practices, to continually developing yourself, your skills, and your inner journey and connection with the divine and all things that lead one to that. And so I look forward now to hearing what's your take 2 answer almost 2 years later to that question.
It's funny because again, like it just doesn't feel like it's been 2 years. Like time goes so fast, but just where I am in my current walk, in my current practice of my spirituality, I'm seeing my spirituality and refocusing my spirituality, especially through the Hindu term of bhakti, of loving devotion, and what it means to be in loving devotion and in service to others. And I think so much of being a modern mystic has to come back to that idea of devotion. You know, that idea of devotion and service to others, of finding love and devotion to the universe, to the divine, finding that within ourselves, but also finding it in others, being able to serve others in that devotion, in that practice, and also bringing out that divine element in others through our devotion and our service to them.
So poignant. I love that answer so much. I am a bhakti yogi at heart for sure. And I really feel that mysticism and spirituality and the whole point of all of it is to help other people and to really collectively push consciousness forward, create, up-leveled humanity, all the things. And so I think often spirituality can be viewed at times as a selfish thing, like to go off to meditate, to pray, to do the things, because often those things can be, not always, in solitude. But it's that practice of going so deeply in so that then we can serve even that much more fully out to the depths where we went in. And that's so beautiful that you're focusing on that lately, and you are just such a servant. I mean, I've always felt that about you in the way of your real devotion to others with the things that you offer. So great, so
Okay.
great. And I think we can ask ourselves, it's a powerful teaching, like when we're doing practices, it can be a good litmus test. Like, are we in touch with serving others? When the ego, because I think that can so happen. And it's something that I'll think about from time to time. Just the idea of, okay, who am I serving? What am I doing to serve? And keep using that as a touchstone can really be again, this litmus test to make sure we're on track and our egos that are healthy and developed aren't out of control too. So I think that's a really good point about that touchstone.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember, especially kind of in the early stages of spirituality. I always go back to the desert mothers and fathers, those kind of ancient mystics who they went out to the desert, to fast and to pray and to be in touch with the divine and to find that inner kingdom of the divine inside themselves. It wasn't for them to go stay out in the desert. Like, they had to come back and return to the community to kind of give what it is that they've gained from this time so that the community would be enriched from this connection to the divine that they had found and that they could find it for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think about that with this podcast, right? You people can listen to this, and in order to listen to a podcast, you have to kind of tune out life and, focus on this. But I know when I'm uplifted by word medicine, then I come back after hearing word medicine and I have so much more to offer my people. So such a great point. And yeah, I love that. So, tarot. I
Yes.
thought we could start because I feel like you are particularly dexterous with sharing how tarot is practical, and perhaps for people listening who are tarot curious, but perhaps a little skeptical too. There's nothing wrong with a little healthy skepticism, I feel like. I feel like that's actually a really great tool of discernment. In yoga, they call that viveka, that you should, you know, anytime you go towards a practice or a teacher, have some kind of perhaps skepticism, because then that's, helps you see if it's efficacious and grounded. So talk to us about tarot, please, and how it works, and maybe perhaps thinking about some people who might be skeptical, speaking to them.
So, how I'd like to present tarot to those who may be new to tarot or maybe skeptical of tarot or maybe just curious and maybe coming to me for a reading for the first time, I'd like to say that tarot is a discernment tool, first and foremost. That tarot is a snapshot of the energy of our lives at that present moment. It's not about so much the past, it's not so much about this future, it's all more about where we are in this present moment and how the energy is flowing. And so, with that, tarot becomes this great discernment about kind of where's the energy stuck in our lives, where's the energy flowing, where's things really moving for me, where are the people or the situations or the different circumstances in our lives that we may need to engage with more fully, or where do we need to take a step back. Again, coming back to that desert imagery, when do we need to go back into the desert to recharge our batteries? And I think that tarot is a great tool for that snapshot of the energy of where our lives are in the present moment, how we can progress our lives forward. Um, I always like to say people come to me as a tarot reader and they want me sometimes to tell them, well, this is what should be done, this is what should be done. But more likely, tarot is more of a tool to empower the person coming for the reading to take really full charge of their lives and returning that power and empowering that person to make better decisions going forward from that reading and really empowering them to live their best life possible.
Such an elucidating answer. And yeah, it's a tool, not a crutch. And I love how you spoke about that word empowerment, because I'm sure people come to you, and I think often, to healers and to people with wisdom such as yourself, and using these different kind of quote unquote mystical spiritual new age tools, and are looking for someone at times to really tell them what to do. I mean, that happens. It happens to me, when I work with people, clients and readings and such. And so yes, the fact that they're this incredible empowerment tool that really, in my mind, act like a mirror that reflect back to us the answers that we know inside, but that are precluded or that we're confused about. But there's, the deep wisdom that so many traditions collectively hold lives within. And to me, the tarot are like this mirror reflecting that wisdom back so we can have those aha moments and connect the dots. So
Right.
I love how you said that.
Yes, and I love that idea of kind of the mirror. Like, I love that idea of that the tarot is a reflection. I usually like to use it as a snapshot, like, it's a photo of where we are now. But I think a mirror is so much more poignant, because even so many times people come to me and they're like, oh, this really confirmed what I was thinking, or this really confirmed what was really going on deep inside of me and what I felt was moving inside of me in this moment. And just like a mirror can sometimes, we can see where the little piece of hair is out of place. Tarot can be that for so many of the different circumstances in our lives.
I love that. And it's funny because when you said snapshot of energy, like it's a snapshot of energy in time, I was like, oh, that's so brilliant because I hadn't thought of that idea that it's not stagnant, of course. That's what I
Right.
love about that metaphor. It's that, oh, this is, when we take a picture that is real, but that's an ephemeral moment too. And in
Right.
that ephemeral moment, it's not stuck, it's going to be changed, etc. But then we can see that snapshot and see the situation or whatever picture we've taken in a way that we can't when we're taking the picture. Like if we're the one taking the picture, we can't see it in the way that when we actually view the picture. So we
Exactly.
loved each other's metaphors. Yay.
Yes.
So I have been around tarot cards and oracle cards pretty much my whole life. And one of the things that struck me when you read for me the first time, and I was like, oh, this guy, I loved your wisdom and perspective because you are so affirming. Speaking of affirming, right? The cards are so affirming and they can be. And I feel like up until that point, so many times I would have a reading or like my friends had cards and we were doing cards or whatever. And even when I was a teenager seeing cards, people would like freak out when a certain card appeared, So like when the devil card appears or when the hangman card. And one of the things I love about the wisdom that you impart is that there are really no bad cards, right? So
Right.
could you speak to that? Because I feel like when I do readings for people, even people are like, I'm afraid I don't want to get a bad card. Like that comes up a lot. So how would
Right.
you speak to that, please?
And I think, a lot of that is Hollywood's perspective on tarot and divination and psychic work. We have this kind of very doom and gloom understanding of the practice, and I always come from that place that there is no bad card, because this is information that you need for your life, and I think one of the things is that life is scary enough, and when we come to tarot, those difficult situations or those scary situations that we find in life, when they show up in the cards, this is just a way for us to dissect how to navigate them. This is our way of being able to clearly see them for what they are, and then be able to say, well, here's a way that we can remedy this, or this is a way that we can work with that energy. Because even difficult energy in our lives and even scary energy in our lives are energy that we can work and transmute, to make a more favorable outcome, in the future as we move forward.
Love that. Love those verbs too about transmuting, that sense that we can alchemize. But if we're not, like, two things. If we bypass and ignore the devil and the shadowy, type hanged person card, then we're not fully embodying life and or our mysticism and or the point, right? Then we're
Right.
bypassing, which happens all the time in spiritual communities. That the other thing that I think is very human and happens is the opposite, which is, completely um, running away and being scared. So it's like, okay, how do we, like you're saying, work with these energies and identify these energies and say, okay, because who doesn't live with shadow? Who doesn't live with fear? Who do you speak to that when you speak to them and have a real in-depth conversation is not going through something, or someone they know is not going through something and they've been impacted, right? No one,
Ex-
right? And so it's so beautiful how you spoke of that realness, because those cards are the realness, I feel like, and the grit and the grist for the mill, as you cited, that help us then navigate it more skillfully. So good.
Exactly. And I think it's like, because so many times I think in our spiritual practice, we've been so affected by the love and the light. And it's just like, it's in the shadow, it's in our difficulty that give us, how do I want to say it? It's like it compacts us. It makes us kind of better. It makes us stronger to be able to attack whatever's coming down the road even later. So it's all about how we work with that energy in the present that makes a better outcome for us in the future.
Yeah. 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 Right. And if we don't name that energy and get clear about that, then we can't navigate it. So we can't steer through it because we're not even recognizing it and calling it out. So you can't
Exactly.
go through something unless you're actually looking at it in the face and then calling it and labeling it for what it is. So, so good. So good. Yay. Okay. So let's talk about the OG deck, the Rider Waite deck, which you went through last time a bit, but maybe you could please, for those who haven't heard that episode, just talk about that deck in the way of, how many cards, how it's divided up in different sections, and then we can even get into the Minor Arcana, which we didn't speak of last time. But let me have you please speak about this sort of traditional deck and maybe a little bit about its origins in Italy and such.
Right. So, a very brief kind of overview of the history of tarot is that we know that playing cards started in China and then eventually ended up in Egypt and then kind of worked their way into southern Italy, where we see the first kind of divinatory use of cards in the kind of the southern Italian magical practice. So we see this done with the Tarachi cards, which is a card game, and we see it also in different types of decks like the Scopa deck and other general playing card decks. As the cards made their way up into Europe, we start to kind of see the suits divided in the way that we're more familiar with them, as that we have like the magician and we have the major arcana and the fool, and then we have the minor arcana, which would have been our normal suits of, as we know in the American playing card, is like the hearts and the clubs and the spades and things like that start to become evolve in Upper Europe. We know of the Rider Waite Smith deck because we can't forget Pamela Coleman Smith, who was the creator and the illustrator of the Rider Waite deck. But Rider and Waite were a part of kind of the European mysticism movement and a part of groups like the Golden Dawn and these different higher magical sects. And actually, Waite was a mystical Catholic. A lot of people, because the Rider Waite has a very Christian presence to it. So there's a lot of different mysticism that we see in the Rider Waite deck, usually taking from the Kabbalah, taking from Christian mysticism, and other different esoteric groups. And so what we have here through the Rider Waite Coleman Smith deck is our first kind of understanding of the modern tarot, going through the Fool's Journey, and then we have the four suits of the cups, the coins, the batons or the rods, or and then the swords as being kind of our main suits of the playing cards, which are the 78 different cards.
Fabulous. So just to recap that great elucidation, there's 78 cards. We've got the major arcana cards, which are, the way I like to think of it, and tell me if this feels true to you, they're very much archetypical cards. They're these like big archetypes that live within each one of us. And, whether they're within ourselves or big aspects of life, but they're kind of big picture energy, so to speak. There are 22 of those. So when we see like the high priestess and the fool, and like you said, the magician, and I feel like they're the ones often in the movies and the Netflix series.
Yes.
And I feel like when I read cards, tell me if this feels true for you. that when I read someone, usually, like often, if I've never read for them before, that one of those cards come up and it's usually them. Like it's usually like a quintessential energy of that person who is new to me. Is that your experience?
So that definitely is my experience with the major arcana. Like, like when I see the major arcana show up, like, that this is very much an aspect of this person, or it's an aspect of where this person is in life in the present moment.
Yeah.
It's very much, again, that kind of that snapshot of where that person is, or who that person is, or who that person is becoming, depending on the reading and the different circumstances in that reading. So it's definitely my experience of that also.
Yeah. And it's funny because often I'll have people who I read, often, not always, but often they have had readings or flirted with it or gotten a deck or something. And they'll say, oh, yeah, that card's come up for me before, which is like another sign. Like I had someone, recently with a magician. He was like, oh, yeah, that came up. That's weird. When, my first reading years ago in California. And I was like, yeah, because that's you.
Yes.
That's your, kind of quintessential energy and, theme and I think a main life lesson. So love that. And then so those are 22. And then the other 56 are called the minor arcana, as you spoke of. And they're the cards attributed, as you said, to what we know as playing cards. And there are four different suits of those, so to speak. And they literally correlate to our playing cards. And those are the pentacles, the cups, the wands, and you gave, there's some synonyms for those, and the swords. So we'll keep flowing with the synonyms. But beautiful. So yeah, could you talk to us about the minor arcana? Because in the episode 13, if you're interested, Michael gave the most truly profound, in-depth, really brilliant depiction of each one of the cards and what they represent thematically and emotionally and psychologically of those cards. And so, yeah, so talk to us today about the minor arcana cards.
I always get with the minor arcana, I always think, people think of minor and they think of lesser, that these are kind of the lesser, and arcana meaning mystery. So we have the kind of the lesser mysteries. And to be completely honest, the minor arcana are my favorite part of tarot.
Are they? I
They
didn't know
are,
that.
yeah, they're actually my favorite cards because these are the energies that we work with on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
These are our day-to-day living lives, where the major arcana are kind of like these big kind of cinematic moments in our lives, or they're big parts of our personality. But when we look in reality of kind of our day-to-day living and what it is that we're doing, or what it is we're trying to manifest, or what it is that we're trying to work on in ourselves and the communities around us, the minor arcana really are the nitty-gritty of that. Like, they're like the meat. You have the major arcana, which are important, and there's these big things, but this is the grit, like this is the gristle of your life, like this is like when it gets down and dirty, is like within the minor arcana. And so with that, I think that the minor arcana is really more of the great mystery, because this is what the energies that we're dealing with from day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we know, the real magic, I mean, it's part of my podcast description. The magic is in the mundane, right? The mystery
Right.
is in the present moment. So I love how you spoke of that, because I think about that with and I never made that correlation with the minor arcana, in that, like you said, so much of the day to day, moment to moment life. And yeah, to me, it's so much about the details and how to. Like when you
Right.
see them in the reading, it's like, yeah, you get the big kind of mythopoetic energies, and we can get swept away, like, and it's kind of like they're a little Hollywood or something, but it's the minor arcana that are like the how to instructions to actually like learn the stuff and do the things and make the growth happen. So So good. So yeah, so talk to us more. Talk to us about, should we start with like the pentacles? Do you want to start and talk a little bit about the numbers? Where do you want to go in with the
I
angle of that?
I want to talk about the cups just because the cups are my favorite suit because I'm a big Scorpio. I'm a double water sign, so it's like my rising sign is Cancer, and then my sun sign is Scorpio. So I'm a big water guy, and so I want to talk about the cups. So with that being said, is that the cups represent the element of water, and so water connects to first and foremost our emotional states and where we are emotionally. And Kilkenny, can we pause for a second because my computer says it's going to die? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we need to.
Yes. Let me move this. Sorry about that.
No problem.
All right, I'm sorry about that.
No problem. I had my tech little tantrum. You can have yours. Okay, so maybe love will pick it up. We'll wait a second and I'll say something about where do you want to start again or angle in case that little backtrack will help the editing.
Perfect.
Thank you. So, where do you want to begin in the way of the foray into the minor arcana, the cups, the swords, the pentacles, the wands? Where do you want to go?
So I want to start with the cups, just because the cups
Yay.
are my favorite suit in the tarot. Because I am a double water sign. My rising is in Cancer and my sun is in Scorpio. So I'm a big water guy. So I love the suit of cups. It's my absolute favorite suit. So at that being said, the cups in tarot represent the element of water. And so water connects to in tarot first and foremost our emotional state, but it also connects to our spiritual development. It also connects to poetic expression. It connects to where we connect to the divine and where we connect with others. So water is very much that conduit for that connection in tarot. And so we have that connection to our dream state, our emotional state, our creative state in water. And so that's it, absolute favorite place to start.
I love water too. I'm a Pisces rising with Jupiter right there on my rising. So I that now I know for sure how we where we met and where we like to commingle right there in the water. So yeah, the water, the cups, and I know you know this, but the cups are so associated with those signs in astrology, Western astrology, and I know in the playing cards, right, that would be associated with the hearts, the hearts that we play, because my kids get excited about the cards, and when we talk about tarot, they think it's so cool. They're connected to the playing cards, right?
Yes.
And in many traditions, I know in particularly the Indian tradition and the yogic tradition, it's often associated with the season of summer and um yeah, just
So
emotions and fulfillment and all those things,
I
abundance.
just I just want to say real quick that's you clarified something for me that we were going to talk about later. Because I do give the card seasons, and summer has always been my association for the cups, and I never knew that. I never knew that in the yogic tradition. So
Yay! I love that. Yeah, yeah, summer, right? Abundance and Lakshmi and just full on expression and the ripening of the fruit that is now ready to just fall off the tree and all those wonderful associations. Now, how would you talk about it, in the way of talking people through the cards, like with getting an ace of cups versus getting a five of cups, and that kind of maturation, because the cards, start from the beginning and then work their way up through the numbers, and then eventually, the page and the knight and the queen and the king, because every suit has four of those as well. So yeah, can you talk us through that, please?
Right. So let's start with the numbered cards first, because I think it's easier to talk through kind of the numbered cards, and then we'll talk about the court cards later, because they're their own special thing.
Okay,
Um,
sounds good.
but what I like to talk about, kind of the maturation of the cards, is that when we start with the cards, each of the suits starts from an ace to 10. If you're working with a more traditionally oriented deck. So the ace of in any of the given suits is like the seed. I always say that the ace is like the seed. So that's the pure energy of whatever the suit is dealing with. So we're talking about cups. So cups is the ace of cups is about that pure emotional seed, that start of emotion and love and spirituality. It is the pure essence of that energy. And as we progress through the cards, that energy expands. The energy either expands to its fruition or to its detriment, depending on which suit that we're talking about. Because with the cups, it becomes a little bit more positive as it goes through, rather than when we're talking about the swords, which get heavier and heavier as that energy
Totally.
progresses. And so basically the journey of the minor arcana in the numbered cards is to the energy, to its expansion to the highest degree. And so when we start at the ace, it's that beginning, it's that first fruits of that energy. And by the time that we get to the 10, it's that energy, if it's completely expanded in our lives and in whatever it is that we're going through.
So good. So good. Love that. Where do you
Yes.
want to go next with which suit?
Which suit? Let's talk about the coins, because the coins are like my second favorite. Are my second favorite in the deck also. So the coins represent the element of the earth. So coins represent being grounded, being in the earthly kind of realm. So it represents also our day-to-day workings. It represents our jobs. It represents our careers. It represents money and commerce. It represents our households. Even our day-to-day task of doing the dishes and vacuuming the floor. The coins really exemplify kind of that earthy part of life, those things that we deal with, those things that get our hands dirty. And so the energy of the coins, what I love about the energy of the coins, especially from the ace, is that the ace is the card of blessing in the coins. It's all about the gift, it's all about the abundance. It's all about kind of the blessings that we receive in our lives. And as the coins expand, what I love about the suit of coins is that the coin expands to how we navigate that abundance that began in that blessing and how we distribute it to others. It's that
Mhm.
abundance that goes into the future. So the coins really kind of solidify ourselves into the earth. It solidifies us into our day-to-day lives and our day-to-day dealings in all these different aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah. And being associated with Earth from the Western astrological standpoint, that would be Taurus, Capricorn, and Virgo for people interested in that, energy. And yeah, I feel like the coins, like you said, so practical, that earth energy, and about obviously our stability and also our self-worth, comes
Right.
up, right? With the pentacles. What did you say?
Yes, and I think that, especially because how I like to my flavor of tarot reading, especially when the earth signs commingle with the earth cards commingle with the water cards. It's that balancing between kind of of kind of the material and the spiritual that bring us together to that self-worth. And I love that kind of that commingling and that interaction that they have in each other.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting because in a lot of different traditions, and I don't want to speak to acupuncture and Chinese tradition too much because I'm not, an expert in that realm. But I have heard, and definitely in the yogic tradition and definitely in the esoteric astrology tradition, both of those I am more seasoned, that earth watering matching goes really well. Like there's a
Yes.
real commingling, and if you think about it, yes, it can create mud, but mud can build homes. What do we used
Right.
to build homes with?
With-
Mud. And there's such great power to that kind of structure. And so I love that you mentioned that earth water commingling and energy together. And yeah, like the cups are so much about, I feel like, the emotional body and the psyche even, not
Yes.
really like the mental body, but where it's, the air is, when we'll get there, is more mental. I feel like it's the emotional feeling aspect of our psyche and psychology and the abundance of that. And then, like you said, the earth is that the pentacles or that practicality and all the things that go with that.
Right. It's that psyche in motion. Like, it's that
Yeah.
psyche in just kind of the work that we do. Cause again, like I love that commingling again of the water and the earth. Cause it's like, if we don't have one or the other, it becomes very unbalanced. And what I find
Yes.
with people who come up in readings where there's a lot of points, they're very dry. Like, it's a very kind of dry understanding of life. And it's like, we have to be always so practical. And it's like, and it's like we need that water to like break that up a little bit, to have some levity in that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. That now, what would you say, like, of the cards, which earth cards, pentacles, we should call as they are colloquially named, the pentacles, which ones do you think are more challenging or speak to the arduousness of pentacles?
So with the pentacles, the one that comes to mind personally, because it's sitting in front of me right now, is the Five of Pentacles. The Five of Pentacles is about kind of being casted out. In traditional tarot, the image is of the poor and they're outside the church, and they're kind of begging for alms in the snow. And I think that the challenging part of Pentacles is very much where we feel lack, and where we feel that abundance is lacking within our lives. And I think also another one that comes to mind is the Four of Pentacles, because the Four of Pentacles in traditional tarot, the image is of the man, and he's kind of holding the pentacles together, which can be a good thing, because it's like, he's holding his abundance close, but there's a point to that where that becomes also very stingy. Like, it becomes very much that this is just for me and it's for nobody else. And so those two cards really come to mind when we think of kind of the challenging understanding of the pentacle cards, is that, there's that times where we feel kind of material lack, and those where it's like, we have the abundance, but it's like, we almost hold it too tightly, where it's like, we're not sharing that abundance with others.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you feel like with all of them, the beginning cards with all four, the pentacles, the cups, the wands, and the swords, that they start, as you said, with that quintessential energy and with the ace, that raw potentiality and almost pure energy. And then when they conclude at 10, would you say that's usually like a positive, quote unquote, expanded kind of energy as well? Those two
Well,
bookends? Is that how you view it?
so it again, like it depends on the suit. Like, it
Totally.
really depends on the suit. Because, like when we get to, let's take the staves, the wands that are more commonly called, the wands are fire energy. And so, fire at its base is so good and it's helpful. but as fire expands, fire becomes out of control. Like, as fire kind of expands and it becomes more dangerous, that energy can almost become a burden. And it's the
Yeah.
same with the swords, as the swords, like our intellects, that idea of our words and our intellects are so important and they're so fundamental to how we communicate and how we get across information. But if we don't temper that with wisdom, our tongues can become very nasty, or information can be used to kind of burden us down. That information becomes a burden to us, as it expands. Also, if we're not careful of those two different energies.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a really helpful way then for people to remember with the readings, the earth and the water ones, as they increase, usually their positivity, for lack of a better word, not to Pollyanna, but sometimes it's if we do kind of thematically think about them, especially when we're getting into, I feel like, moderate readers. Like, I feel like a lot of people know a little bit about them, but when you start to do more and more readings, and like you said really eloquently, that with the wands slash staffs or the swords, then the more and more, like when you're pulling those cards a while ago, I was pulling one, and I was getting like, all the 8 and 9s of those. And I was like, oh God, you know, it's like you said, it's grist for the bill, but it was like a heavy situation. It was an intense kind of situation because air and fire are also these kind of pairs, right? And
Right.
when you have air and fire, together, they work really well together. So I feel like, and that's also in the yogic tradition and many traditions, right? The earth and the water can work really well together in an easeful way.
Right.
And it's like that, best friend that you just don't have to even say, all the perfunctory things. You can just get into it, right? The earth and
Right.
water, I feel like, are like that. And then the fire and air are like that too.
Right. Exactly.
But then that air, and this is totally in astrology, they're very compatible in a certain kind of sense, but then the air can make the fire out of control, right? There's always the two sides of every coin. So it's really interesting. Now, we talked about the cups, but I just want to circle back to the cups and which cards do you feel like are more challenging? We talked about the beginning being really sweet, and then as the cups grow in number, like with
Mhm.
the pentacles, when they grow in number, there's a lot of um, positivity, if you will, with those often. And of course, it depends who they're next to, and there's a whole storyline being told. But for people learning about the cards, which in your mind are more challenging cup cards?
So for me, it's very much the Five of Cups are very challenging because the Five of Cups has to do with kind of malaise. It has to do with kind of feeling on the outside. And in traditional tarot, it's the guy and he's being presented the cup, and he's being presented the cup and he's kind of like folding his arms. It's like, it's like he's being given the blessing and he just refuses to kind of see it, and I think it's one of those things where it's like, we can't always see the good in our lives, that when we're kind of just looking at what it is that we seem that we lack. The other one with that is the Five of Cups, which I like to call the don't cry over spilled milk card, um, because the image on it is a man and he's looking at a kingdom, and the kingdom is like in disarray. The kingdom is absolutely in disarray and the cups are all spilled over everywhere, and it's like, these are the times that we make maybe these dreadful mistakes in our lives and things like that, but it's at the same time like these images and these situations are for us to learn from. So I always like to call it the don't cry over spilled milk card. It's like, it's like, what do we do after that?
The Five of Cups. I love
Yes,
it.
the Five of
I love
Cups.
that. It's so good. So now let's move on to the staff slash wands.
so the
Not
wands
your.
so the wands are a fun are fun in lots of different ways, because fire is about kind of this energy and how we get things moving. This is the energy that we put behind our work, this is the energy that we put behind our relationships, this is the energy that we put in our expansion. And I love that energy, and it's just like it's energy in so many different types of ways. It's the energy that we put into our passions. In many ways, the wands are also about sexual energy, and how we bring that energy into our day-to-day lives, because that sexual energy plays into so many different aspects of our lives, in kind of our manifestation work. And so it's all about the energy that we're either putting in, or the energy that's also acting against us, because so many of the cards in the suit are about our expansion, but it's also about the energy that's coming at us, from the outside also.
Yeah, yeah, so good, so good. Yeah, fire is that passion and like you said, the things that we really action really, right?
Right.
Like movement and the way that we do our work and follow our passions and run towards those calls that excite our spirit and our sexuality, like you said, and our passion and our Mars, our libidos and things like that. So
Yes.
I love that. And of course, in Western astrology, we'd be talking about Aries and Leo and Sagittarius.
I love that connection with Sagittarius, especially because like so many of the cards in the suit of wands is about the party. And it's like, like I like to say that the four of wands is like it's the pre-party before the actual party, because in traditional tarot it's the image of the reception for the wedding,
Right.
and it's like we have
The party.
it's the party before, it's the pre-party before the party,
It's
like
so good.
and so much of that energy. And I find that people with Leo and Sagittarius and Aries, and especially Sagittarius, because Sagittarius people just like love the party, and I just think that they're just like the quintessential, like, wonderful hot messes that just are the suit of wands. And I say that with all love too to all the Sagittarius out there. I love Saggies, I do.
Well, the fire energy, at least in astrology, right, are the people who are like you said, like vivacious and they love to party and then sometimes they say like they put their foot in their mouth because they'll blurt things out and
Right.
like it's that fire. It's that it's hard to sometimes the feeling of containing, but they're leaders and they inspire us and we follow them around, right?
Right.
The passionate people and that's such an important part of life to have desire and passion for things and action, of course. So I love that it's associated in the yoga tradition with spring. And I don't think we mentioned that the pentacles are associated with winter. Is that also your hit and understanding too of the cards?
No, so actually I associate pentacles with the spring, because I
Nice.
because I because I associate it with the harvest, and then for me the wands are the fall. So it's like that last fire of kind of this going from summer into that energy of winter, and then the swords for me are of course winter.
The swords are winter. I love that
Yes.
so much. And yeah, I think that, and that's interesting because I've heard the swords also sometimes as fall. And it's so great because it's like we can look at it and say, okay, none of this is wrong.
Right.
Like I had, someone actually DM me after the last tarot episode and I forget what they asked me, but it was something specific about something. And she's like, well, I had heard something else. And so we went back and forth a few times very lovingly and it was sweet. And she's like, oh, and isn't it interesting? I heard this there. And I said, oh, isn't it interesting there? And that's the cool thing about ideas and traditions and really being modern mystics. It's not about the duality of right and wrong. It's about this gift of the technology age and the gift of conversation and the gift of being able to blend different traditions and
Right.
see what feels true and works for you and whatever resonates then you take it, and that's the beauty of these times I feel like and the beauty of being a modern mystic.
Right. And I
Do you
think
concur?
I concur, and I think like so much as we enter into this age of Aquarius, and so we kind of full on to that energy, is that it's so much about breaking down rigidness. It's so much
Yes.
about breaking down rigidity and like these very kind of set things because so much of traditional tarot and so much of traditional divination, as those who have been raised in these traditions, is it's very much, well, my grandmother told me that this means this, and it only means this, and it only corresponds to this, and there's
Mhm.
that kind of rigidity around these traditions. But I think as time goes on and as we enter into the energy of the age that we're entering into, there's so much this possibility for expansion and for innovation and for creativity when it comes to these tried and true tradition and modalities, that there's this ever flowing and ever evolving conversation of what these things mean for each and every person from a different perspective.
Yeah, so well put. So well put because that's it. The Aquarian age and the energy of Aquarius is breaking down old structures. I mean, that's what Aquarian energy is. And as you said so eloquently and with such articulateness, that it's about building things up, in ways that make sense for us, and rebuilding and restructuring and not being so rigid like you said. It's breaking it down, Uranus energy.
Yes.
Though you used to be ruled by Saturn, which is very structured, but then Uranus came around and now it's sort of, Aquarius is ruled by both of those planets. So it's about like structure, having structure, and then breaking the structure down, and then having structure, and that's so helpful, I think, with the tarot, because when people get readings, and I'm curious, if you think this and how you feel about this, but these days, like, I'll just have someone look at the spread, and before I even say anything, I'm like, "Hey, what stands out for you?" Just take a couple quiet moments, and which images speak to you? What do you see even? And just have people really take in what speaks to them in the way of the archetypes, what stands out to them, because inevitably, again, that mirror idea, whatever wisdom is meant to be shared with them, they pull it from the cards. It's like that wise part of themselves take that in, so that I'm not overlaying something that, is precluding and being more obstructive to the own truth of what the cards want to reveal, which is, the wisdom that lives within those people.
Right. And I definitely see that more and more as readings progress and with people and things like that. And I do sometimes ask, like, which sticks out to you. And the deck that I use most for reading is an untraditional deck, because it uses kind of the archetypes as Christian saints. And so a lot of my clients will look at the deck and they'll be like, oh, like, I see myself a lot in the saint, because a lot of my clients will know the story, or they'll say, like, I grew up with this saint in my life, for so many years, and I haven't thought about that saint and what they stand for in my practice and in my growth. And so I definitely do see that in the way that people relate to the cards and relate to the archetypes, no matter how those archetypes show up.
Yeah, yeah, so cool. Love that. What about the swords? We got to the fact that when you get a lot of swords, yeah, you might, take a couple extra deep breaths.
Yes.
But talk to us a little bit more, please, about the sword energy, and let's dive into the last suit of the swords.
So the swords in tarot represent the intellect. They are the element of air, and so they represent our intellect. They represent our communication. They represent writing. They represent the internet. They represent all these different ways that we learn and that we share information. So with that, the swords are such a rich suit of the tarot, but at the same time, they can be the most difficult to deal with of all of the different suits, out of all of them, I feel that the swords come off as the most sharp, because even just with the swords, and let's take it even back. Let's not even use swords. Let's use the archetype of a knife. A knife can be really helpful. You know, we can use it for cooking, we can use it to slice through different things, we can use it to cut cords and things like that. But at the same time, if we're not careful with a knife, we can cut ourselves, and even more importantly, we can cut somebody else with that knife if we're not using the knife properly, or we're not using it with discernment and as it should be used. And I think that the sword suit really balances out that energy of, that this is such a powerful tool, but if not used mindfully, that it can become something very destructive at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a gorgeous description and really, really, really profound. Thank you so much because yeah, the swords are that and there are the mind, right? And the
Right.
thoughts and the mental capacities. And I love what you said about how that knife, right, can, right, use it for cooking and for cutting bread, and you can use it in that way that nourishes, or you can use that to kill. And, when you were speaking that way, I was thinking about it's such a powerful metaphor for our life, right? Just like our life, people can use the life to kill, and people can use the life, like we were saying, to come full circle in bhakti, to be of service. There's those
Right.
ends of the spectrum, and the swords really can represent that, and that part of being embodied, that's the truth, that is that. And
Exactly.
they're associated with Libra and Gemini, in addition to
Yes.
Aquarius. So all the air signs for the people who are air infused with their charts, and their doshas and Ayurveda are their air energy. So I love that. So Michael, what in the parting words would you say, I don't know, are like your two or three most important kind of things that people should take away from exploring tarot? Or maybe not even important things to take away, but things just to keep in mind when they are exploring tarot.
I think it's one thing is important is to have fun with it, because I think sometimes with these modalities we come into like this very kind of serious mindset, and that this is going
Absolutely.
to we're going to come, and this is going to reveal all these things, and it's going to be this heavy burden. But I think it's to come into this with some levity and with some brevity, and coming that this is a snapshot of the energy, this is a tool to be able to help us to make discernments and make decisions going forward. And I think that we have to kind of find the joy in that, and we have to find the humor in that also. And me, because we've had readings together, we laugh through all our readings.
I love
Like
that. I
you know
love that. And I feel like that literally is the wisest thing you could say. You're such an old soul and you are that way, and I love that so much because I feel like just in all spirituality, sometimes there's, and this is so Sagittarius, by the way, this perspective right now, I'm going to say, and I'm not a Sagittarius by my sun sign, but I have a North Node, and it's this perspective of like taking ourselves so seriously that we forget that joy and levity, which is the essence